Hello and welcome back to the Scale Modelling Cafe, and welcome to part 4 in the latest project, the Zokei Mura F-4C Phantom in 48 scale. In this episode I'll be doing the Ordnance, the Undercarriage and the Canopy detail set from Hypersonic. Okay, this episode all starts with the drop tanks, so you can see there that I'm using my standard ammo black super glue technique of gluing the halves together, hitting it with accelerator, and then we can go in and sand it straight away. I'm applying a little bit of pressure just to make sure the parts are actually together. It's quite easy actually if you let them spring apart when hitting it with the accelerator. You can get gaps and things like that. So I am just doing a little bit of a gentle squeeze. And then seconds later we can start sanding, and it's very important to not sand a flat spot. So I'm just being very gentle, not using too much pressure with the kind of solid sanding stick, and then going in with sanding sponge, and all this will help just to keep that round profile, if you like. Checking it with my finger. Your finger's actually really sensitive and will pick up any tiny little imperfections, and it's really handy actually. And then sanding along the seam as well. This will just help to polish out those scratches. Stretching sprue. Most drop tanks are welded together, welded steel rather than aluminium panels, and rather than rescribe over the panels, I decided to simulate that weld bead with stretch sprue. So just a little bit of glue is put in first, just to give a little bit of bite, and then what you can do is actually stretch it round so it conforms, and then go in with a little bit more glue. And again, another advantage of the ammo brush, it's super precise. And you can just lay the stretch sprue in the recessed panel line. Again, hitting it with a little bit more glue, and just working our way around the actual panel. And there's a few panels on these, and then it's a simple job just to get the scalpel blade nice and sharp, and you can just press it in the corner there, and it's exactly the right length. And then just using the back of the blade there, just going in just to push it into place. And there's the finished article. I did run over a sanding sponge just to sort of blend them in a little bit, but yeah, I'm really pleased with how that turned out. Now the Ordnance. So these, I used the Eduard set, so resin missiles with some photo etch parts. So the end of the missiles is part of the photo etch, and actually this missiles, what tends to happen is in the back there's a desiccant plug which will make sure that the literally the powder stays dry, so it's not open at the back when just at rest. And I thought it would be a good idea just to drill and pin the fins. The rear fins come moulded integrally with the missile body itself, but yeah, not the forward fins. So they were drilled out through the actual resin pin, as you can see. And this is very fine steel wire, I think 0.1 or 0.2, something like that. Pushed into place there, and then just cut to length. And that's going to make it much more strong. You can't drill too far, obviously, and you can see the pin poking through. There's kind of divots in the moulding So really handy guide for the pins, and you'll note that this drill bit is slightly bigger than the pins, but that's absolutely fine. And we can drill all the way through, and then just a little bit of glue. Just cleaning up with my finger. My fingers get mired in this black stuff. And then it's just a simple case of just pushing into place, and then that will be nice and secure. I didn't bother with the other side because it's going to sit up in the recess. On with the primer. Now the missiles, before I started any of this, were cleaned in the sonic cleaner in detergent and then rinsed off, so that will get rid of any mold release agent. But I do find it's worthwhile priming resin parts. Just helps with the paint adhesion. So this is Mr. Surfacer 1200, nice and thin, and it goes on really super smooth, which is exactly what we want. Once the primer's dry, it's on with the gloss white, and this is the GSI Creos GX, I think it's 2. I should have written this down, I always forget. It's either one is black or 2 is white, or it's the other way around, doesn't matter. I think you can find it easily enough. And this is really opaque stuff. It's tough as boots, and yeah, it's the perfect sheen. It's not like uber glossy. If you remember, it's the stuff I used for the intakes, and it just goes down beautifully. Really smooth, but not too shiny. Perfect scale effect. Not forgetting the end, of course. And just building up in very sort of smooth, thin layers, just to keep that shininess. I am doing the underside because just in case you know, if you look a little bit lower, you'll see the a little bit of the underside. And the nose caps were grey, so a little bit of simple masking. It's an MRP colour, 375, I think. FS blah blah 375, I think it was. And the MRP, it dries really quickly, so straight away we can remove that masking, and you can see how sharp that looks. Now for the decals, and there's lots of decals that go on here. These are the live rounds, therefore you'll see the yellow band and then the brown band going on in a sec, plus some stenciling. The brown tells the ground crew and air crew actually that it's a live round, live explosives. And from my old Skyflash days, I can't remember where the brown goes. I've got a feeling the brown band goes around where the actual explosive is, but I might be wrong on that. It's been a while. And there's the finished missile after a very light grey subtle wash, just to make the detail pop. Looks really nice. Now for the Sidewinders. The forward fins are resin. They're photo etched in the 72nd version, but they're resin here. And I just found it, a metal file was the perfect tool just to clean things up, because it's just too thin to drill and pin, unfortunately. But it was the same idea. The holes were opened up with the drill bit. Obviously 4 holes, so you can drill right through. And then just a little bit of super glue, and they were just glued into place. Now I'm just lining it up here with the rear fins, because we don't want any wonkiness. Thank you very much. And the set comes with this handy little sort of jig photo etch jig that you make up, and that will just make sure all the fins are nice and square. And there's the finished missile. Well, not quite finished actually, because I've not put the photo etch rear bit on. So the painting was the same as the Sparrow. I always pause there because I always want to say Skyflash, but obviously it's not a Skyflash, it's a Sparrow. And the same sort of mammoth decaling job went on. The difference here is the rollers on the rear fins were hand painted in a sort of a very dark gunmetal type colour. They were brush painted. So you can see a big pin sticking out there. That's what I'm going to use to pin it to the missile rails. Also a handy handhold for painting and weathering. So a little bit of fettling required, as you can see. So that was the yellow band. Now this kind of forward band goes on. Can't remember exactly what that was all for. It may be the infrared sensors. And then once the decals are dry, we can go in with a mid-grey wash. Don't want things to be too stark. But the advantage of that GX paint, it being so smooth, is you can just go in and just rub off the excess with the cotton bud. And that does a good job of blending things in as well. And the final bit is the clear resin seeker head covers. And there is the finished Sidewinders. And there is the finished loadout. All 8 missiles ready to go. Attention now turning to the undercarriage. And the bottom of the gear legs was drilled out because it's a little bit fiddly, and you can just insert a cocktail stick in the bottom, and it's a handy handle for when you're doing the painting. And as you can see here, the detailing. So I got some images off the internet, and there was a little bit of wiring, not too much actually, especially compared to a modern jet, but the extra wire really does dress things up. A little bit of lead wire just stuck into place. You can see there's a little bit of brass tubing at the bottom. Again, all just copied from the reference photos, and it's a fairly simple job actually to just glue it in place. Now some of the wires were white, some were black, so those ones that are sticking out there ended up being black. They were brush painted with VMS metal primer first, and then the whole thing was primed with Mr. Surfacer. Once painted white, again with the GX2, it was a simple job of going in with the mid-grey wash again. And this just simulates a little bit of dirt and grime build-up, and also highlights that detail. Once the excess was removed, I did go in with some white acrylic paint actually, just to touch up some of the highlights, and that really makes the detail pop. It's quite subtle, but it is noticeable. And here's the nose leg. I didn't do too much filming on the nose leg because there's not too much extra wiring to be done on there, to be honest. And there is the finished main gear leg. He says almost. This is chrome tape from Amov MiG, and it's absolutely superb at simulating the sort of chrome oleo whatnot. And especially when it's really narrow here, it's much easier to get in there rather than trying to brush paint some silver paint or get in there with a chrome pen or something. The tape is absolutely brilliant for that. And there is the finished leg. The nose gear leg just being finished off there, and you can see how effective that chrome is. Wheels, these are from ResKit from the Ukraine. Not the Ukraine, sorry. That really winds me up when I hear that. From Ukraine. And again, painted with the ubiquitous GX2 and a wash applied. And then again, because it's so smooth, you could just go in with the cotton bud and just remove everything. Now this is the dry brush paint from Ammo, and it's just absolutely brilliant. The ResKit wheels come with lettering on the sidewall, and I just used this mid-grey colour just to go in and very subtly highlight it all, just to make that detail pop. It's a shame not to. They've been painted, as you can see already, in a sort of tyre colour, and I do like that sheen. It's not too flat. And there is the finished undercarriage with all the jacks and the wheels and everything. The air brakes next were painted white, and actually all the undercarriage doors and everything and the remaining struts and things were painted on the sprues. So over the undercoat of white, MRP red was applied, and then a sort of dirty brown colour oil wash was used just to highlight the detail. That was left to thoroughly dry. Doesn't take long, maybe half an hour or so, and then you just go in with the cotton bud and just rub off the excess. And this is really good where you've got this raised detail, especially the rivets. Much easier than trying to clean it up with a brush, and as you can see, it's very quick. MRP being very, very smooth paint, it's no drama. And then all that was sealed in with VMS satin varnish just to kill the shine, but it still had a sheen on it. Actually, it's really good stuff, as you can see. Onto the canopy detailing set now. This is from Hypersonic, and I primed the photo etch parts, as you can see here, on the fret, just using the VMS metal primer, which is brilliant stuff. The canopies were masked, and then on the centre section sprayed black first, and you can see there the photo etch has also been sprayed black. And then it's just a simple case on the centre section of just building it up. So there's photo etch for the front and the rear, and then this resin bit underneath, which needed some wiring added. And then that sort of centre section bit was just super glued in place. Just being very sparing with the super glue here, because it's not going to fog anything, because the glass it's already been masked. But I just didn't want to risk any sort of glue maybe seeping under the masks or affecting the masks, anything like that. So it's glued very sparingly and then popped into place. Just held there for a few seconds. And there we go. I'm really pleased with that. You can see the shine from the glue there. Now the rear part. So again, just using a little tiny pin. Just dabbing the super glue in place. I'm being very sparing, as you can see. Don't want to splurge glue everywhere. And then we'll just attach the rear part of the photo etch. Yeah, just making sure everything's in exactly the right place. And then once the photo etch was all done, and actually a little bit of gentle sanding just to blend it in, you can see there it's shiny. I just went in with more black paint. Again, this is MRP. And then on the inside were 3 little tiny bits of resin, instruments and bits of kit. So they were all glued into place. That one there had a bit of leftover decal from an airscale set, just applied for the instrument. And then these resin bits were glued into place and then were wired up. And then once they were wired up, it was again painted black and actually glued onto the model. So this is the windscreen. Really, really fine plastic moulding. So the photo etch is actually really fine as well. And then just using the back of the tweezers there just to apply a little bit of pressure. And again, once allowed to dry, that was sanded and painted. Here's this little instrument going up here. I don't know what this is. Clock, maybe. Don't know. And then, as I said, once it's all dry, it was the inside was painted. And I tend to paint the inside. I always paint the inside of canopies, actually. I just think you just get a much better scale effect. It all looks a bit odd, I think, when you can like look through the glass at the inside colour. It just looks really odd to me. So I always paint the inside. Now for the clamshell bits, and this is the Wizzo's canopy, which was the easier one, so I decided to start with this first. Once cleaned up the resin bit, it was just popped into place. It's a bit of a fiddle actually to get that in. There is a sort of a little nubbin and a little hole in the plastic part, and it was a little bit tricky to line all that up, which was a bit of a shame, but I got there in the end. So I recommend you just glue the back part in, because the side bits are very flexible, and then just glue the side bits in later, or afterwards rather, once the back part is dry and nice and solid. Definitely don't want to rush anything here. And just using a little gentle pressure there on the clamp. You can see now it's all been masked off, and then applying a little bit of glue ready for the photo etch parts, which fit lovely actually. Just trying to get the tweezers ready. And then I just found it easier just to line up the back first, and then just using a little bit of pressure with the tweezers, just making sure it's sat absolutely perfect. And once that was done, it was back with the MRP. And that's the rear canopy pretty much done. There is the actuator at the back and a little bit of wiring, but I'm going to wait until the everything's finished, and that'll be the final job. Will just be to add that final bit of wiring as we mount the canopies onto the model. I have done a separate review of the Hypersonic set, so you can go and search that out on the channel if you wish. And you can see all that lovely detail at the back, and you will see all that with the canopy open. Front canopy was a little bit more tricky because there is this raised bit here. It's a bit nerve-wracking. You have to remove that plastic all the way down, but if you're careful, it's not too bad. And then it builds up pretty much the same as the rear. So you put the back part on first, then glue the sides in, then the photo etch, and there's actually a little bit more resin that goes on. It's a little bit more detailed, the front canopy, but the advantage of this set is the detail is fantastic, and it really bulks it out. Actually, you look at the sort of canopies of modern jets, and they are really quite heavy and really quite thick. And I also just a light dusting of black over the back as well. And then what I'll do is I'll prime that in grey when I get to the actual painting of the model, so it all blends in. And there it is, and that was coated in matte varnish actually at the end. And the final thing was back to the dry brush paint. Now I did add some black to it, just some ammo acrylic black, because otherwise it is too light. Looks like it's been snowing in there. But it's a really good way of just highlighting all that detail. Being black, it is lost a little bit if you're not careful. Sorry, it's just out of shot there. But some of that riveting is absolutely exquisite, and it deserves to have a little bit of a dry brush just to make it pop. And there we go. There is the windscreen and the centre section with all the wiring, and the wiring does actually go down the sides of the seat. It makes it look really, really busy there. And the main centre sections. As I said, there's a few little bits and pieces missing there, some wiring, but I'll do all that when it comes to gluing them in place, which will be the final job. And that's it for part 4. The next part will be up in a few weeks' time, and that'll be the painting of the model, which I really can't wait for. So I'll see you then. Cheers, bye-bye.